Greg Stangle, welcome to the Shred Podcast Truck. I mean, what better place to have a conversation than in the podcast truck?
Fantastic place to be, and I'm thrilled to be with you, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, so Greg, I think more than anybody, you have a voice for radio.
Never heard that before, but I'll take it as a compliment.
I don't think you've ever heard that before
I've been
in
on
your
the radio.
entire life.
I've been on the radio, actually.
Have you?
I've done commercials in the past, yeah.
Did you get paid to do a commercial?
So quick little story here before we jump in. So I, right out of college, I worked for a big investment banking firm. I was an accountant by education, wanted nothing to do with accounting in terms of my main career. I learned enough to know that that's not what I wanted to do, but I like finance. So I went to work for an investment banking firm, which was a great first step. And somebody there knew, who I met early on, had a friend who was in the broadcasting business. And so anyway, I went and I went to ABC and they had me do some readings, offered me a little bit of work, but it was real work. And it was the kind of thing where I had my job as a, beginning analyst with a big investment banking firm.
Right.
And then they said, well, you got to take some classes but you can do some promo stuff. And so I did one little spot, and I was like, I have a real job. And it didn't pay anything. I mean, it was like the money is so poor.
Right.
So I didn't do it. So I dropped it. But then fast forward later to when I owned my data storage company, which is how I came to meet you.
Yeah.
We launched a radio campaign at one point on talk radio in Chicago, 560 AM, which was a very popular station at the time. And so we bought some spots. We go in to meet with the GM and the talent, the on-air talent that was going to do our ads. And the minute they heard me talk, they're like, you should be doing the ads.
You're your own talent.
So we did these commercials, and I did most of the talking.
That's cool.
Bullard, my part at the time, was also in those commercials, but mainly I was the voice.
Yeah, well, you are the voice. So let's dig in a bit. So let's start first, context of who you are today and what you do, and then we'll jump back into history, because I think history gives good context for what you do now. So tell us sort of in a, your elevator pitch, who are you and what do you do today?
Sure. So I am foremost an M&A investment banker. I spend most of my time helping private companies package up and sell their businesses. So mainly entrepreneurs, wealthy families, sometimes smaller businesses out of larger companies that want to sell to private equity firms, public companies that are serial acquirers like we have in this industry, or industry consolidators. So in a nutshell, I quarterback those deals from start to finish, and I really enjoy doing it. So that's most of what I spend my time doing. I'm also a corporate lawyer, as you know. I was a big firm lawyer before I got into this industry, and so I've always had a kind of boutique corporate law practice. I represent a number of companies here at iSigma, doing general corporate counseling, negotiating for them, and helping them out with business strategies. So mostly iBanking, sell-side M&A.
Okay, so let's jump back into the M&A just for a second before we go deeper. In the M&A side, you said you do. Do you do more than just in this industry?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. So different. I'm not gonna. I mean, I've done things in software, technology, other professional services, industrials. I just closed a deal in kind of commercial linen and laundry services, which is actually kind of a bigger industry than people would think.
Significantly bigger one.
Yeah, so I've done things in a bunch of different industries: distribution, logistics.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew you were playing on the outside. I didn't know how deeply you were. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah.
Okay. So now that we have a context of what you do, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, but let's go back, because when I started to get to know you and your partner had a data vault.
We did. We had a.
So tell me a little bit about that story.
Yeah. So it wasn't just a data vault, Tom. If you recall, it was a Firelock, nuclear grade.
Oh, it was
blast proof, nuclear. I mean, anything proof data vault. So we got into this business, and I wasn't a tech guy at all. I was a technology lawyer. I told you about I was an accounting and finance guy first.
Right.
And then I went back to law school, became a corporate lawyer, was with a big law firm. And through my law practice doing M&A and technology deals, I didn't learn about storage, but I learned about software escrow. And I realized, because clients were asking me on transactions to find somebody to hold, manage, and test source code that they were acquiring, I realized there was this whole cottage industry of companies like Iron Mountain and Recall and a bunch of others that were storing data on tapes and discs and in vaults of various composition, and they were providing this escrow service. So I had a client who once asked me on a deal, he said, Greg, we trust you. Why can't you hold the data and be our escrow agent on the deal, and you hire the guys, the tech guys, to test it? That was the idea.
And that was the door opener.
Yeah, that was what got me thinking about it. And so at the time, my then business partner, he was working in the same group as me, and he was having a similar experience. So we launched our software escrow business as a side venture. And then it didn't take too long, within a year, where we were contacted by a major technology company in Silicon Valley. I can tell you who it was. It's been a long time. You remember how online conferences were done by WebEx? That was a service?
Yeah.
So WebEx contacts us, and they're like, hey, we heard from our attorneys that you have this escrow service. Can you store backup tapes?
And that was it. And then you guys actually eventually built what was often thought of as one of the premier vaults in the country.
It was, yeah. And there was a gentleman named Hugh Smith who owned the Firelock Company, a fantastic guy who we hooked up with early on when we were looking for infrastructure, looking for real estate in Chicago, where we were based, to build our facility. And we built a small, modest Firelock data vault, and we very rapidly filled it with backup tapes and software.
Yeah.
And then the vault that was the big one, we outgrew that, and we bought an old injection molding plant in a very nice industrial park in the suburbs. And then we redeveloped it, and we built what Hugh told us, and he, as you know, Hugh was prone to hyperbole, but I believe it was true, the largest Firelock vault that he'd ever made.
Right.
And then we blew that out and filled it with tape.
Yeah, and he often bragged on that your facility. I mean, but Hugh would brag about a lot of facilities, but he bragged on yours more than the average one.
Yeah, I appreciate that. He was a great guy, and he was instrumental in teaching us what would be marketable to our clientele. So back then, we were catering to IT departments of companies, and so being in Chicago, which is a good data center market and a good financial market, we were catering to investment firms and data centers.
But you, because of the background you came out of, that's what was always intriguing to me, because of your legal background, and because of your understanding of escrow, you had a really interesting, natural way to reach a higher level of client than just the IT director.
Yeah, you hit it on the head. So to rewind, my background, I started off, when I tell you I worked for a big investment firm, we were doing a roll-up of major and regional investment firms around the country. So I got M&A experience there. Yeah. And then I became a lawyer, and I worked in M&A and tech. And on that side, at the law firm, a big law firm that's now DLA Piper.
Okay, yeah.
So one of the biggest in the world. So in that job, I was very fortunate, because as a young guy, I was representing PE firms, and I was sitting on these meetings where we were talking about like what they wanted to buy, what they were looking for, what would sell, and executing on those deals. And then sometimes I was on the other side. I was on the entrepreneur side, getting funding, or the company was going to sell or whatever. And so, so when we launched IG2, one thing I've learned from that experience as a lawyer, and also prior, was that if you really wanted to like move the needle as a startup, you had to do something different. And so to your point about doing it more professional, or the whole goal here was to take a service that was essentially storage and really like make the least sophisticated thing that we did basic storage. And so the idea was that everybody else in our market was doing paper storage, and then they were doing tape storage, and sometimes they didn't have really a vault like we had. We spent the money on the sizzling infrastructure. So we started with the tape storage, in a much better infrastructure. And then we wrapped technology around it, like software that was much better at tracking audit trails. We did TMS syncs with the IT department.
Right.
So we did all these other things. And then we added litigation escrow.
Yeah.
So it was more like a professional service to the buyers. And that allowed us to charge much more money than everybody else was getting.
Yeah, you were doing premium dollar deals.
It was crazy what we charged, and they paid it.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And I mean, it was interesting to watch you guys and observe because because I got to see under the hood of a lot of different companies, and you guys were doing something really unique at that point in time in our industry. You know, when a lot of people had tape vaults and they called them tape vaults and they just vaulted basic stuff, you guys were doing something really kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and so we had the vault. The vault was big and impressive, and the guys that were willing to spend the premium money, so we're talking about trading firms in Chicago, hedge funds, they knew the difference because they did their homework. So then when we would get them out to our facility for a tour, so we bought this old injection molding plant. We built gorgeous office space. It looked like you were walking into a tech company.
Right.
So it wasn't like everything was. We spent the money to make it very, very nice and a place that they wanted to be.
Yeah.
And then we built a couple of nice conference rooms, war rooms, we called them. So when those companies were in litigation, we could do the electronic discovery sessions in our facility, and that further differentiated us. So when we made a pitch to a new account and they were looking at us or Iron Mountain or Recall or whoever, then we would say, look, we can offer you all these other services. You may not need them, but they're there if you need them.
Right.
And then we bring them into our facility, and that would usually cinch the deal.
Bam.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's fast forward, and that business was acquired. So you sold that business.
Correct.
And when did you sell that again?
So we sold it at the end of 2012.
2012.
And then we transitioned in the early part of 2013. We sold it to Iron Mountain, and it was a great transaction for everybody. They were wonderful to deal with.
Yeah. And then subsequent to that, you've gone into M&A work and legal work. So let's come from that angle now. So what are you seeing in the marketplace? Let's start in the M&A side, because I think that's an interesting side to start on. What are you seeing in the marketplace? What are you observing in terms of what's happening, both, say, in the shredding side, record side? Give me a sense of your perspective on the market in the M&A side of things.
Sure, of course. So what I'm experiencing is, obviously, everybody knows that there was a slowdown in the last couple of years. This business historically has been, from my view, very cyclical in terms of acquisition. So again, I like to look back at what's already occurred, and then it's often a good predictor of what's going to happen in the future, even if the timelines change a little bit. So when we started our business, our storage business, working in law with serial acquirers, I learned that you can pick companies that often buy, i.e. an Iron Mountain or a Recall at the time, and you could track kind of their trends. So when do they do most of their deals? How many years does it take? And then how long is the integration period, the slowdown? What do valuations look like at the early part versus the later part? And then when do they dry up? And then when does it repeat itself? Because it always does. So you'd end up having, at the time that we started, you end up having a lot of companies that would come into the marketplace on the storage side, whether it was paper or tape, and they would get traction, they get to a certain size, get acquired, then there would be just a dearth of options for customers, except for the big guys, and then startups would pop up again, and so it would repeat. So what I see now is the cycles are more compressed. So, because we've had things happen that were unthinkable in the past. I mean, we got through COVID, and I remember I did an interview with the Virtual Sigma on M&A during COVID, and everybody was saying the sky is falling, like deals are going to die forever, and it's never going to come back, whatever. And so, but I thought, no, this is the time that if you're in the business, and we were already out of the business, but we were doing M&A, that if you're in the business, this is the time that you basically retool. You try to do whatever you can, not just to stay afloat, but try to grow, because you have no competition now because everybody else is scared.
It's a really good time.
And position yourself so that the minute it lifts, you're ready to go, because the buying will explode. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, and I think a lot of guys saw that. So right now, so you had COVID and you had the pickup afterward, but then things changed again. So we had some good buying, and then the last couple of years have been slow. We've still been doing deals in this industry, but the multiples were less than people saw during the heyday.
Right.
And obviously, there's because of what's happened in the shred industry. What we're seeing is that if you're a larger shred company and you're in a really good market, then you're probably in pretty good shape. But the days of the sky high multiples, I think, are long gone.
Yeah,
so the
and-
realistic
and-
expectations.
And I don't think they'll ever come back.
I would agree. I hate to
Yeah.
say never, but I think in that I don't think they're going to because
Well, yeah.
yeah.
Because I mean inherently, and you see this, but to me, I also see that it's I've talked to different people and I see lead flows down, lead opportunities down. There's a transition in the way specifically the shredding industry is operating now. Pretty much everybody's vended because it's a commodity service now. So what you're trying to do now, and my guess is what you're advising your clients to do, is get really good at what you're doing now and build your profit margin, your EBITDA margin, those kind of things, because that's what makes you more saleable. If you're, I mean, tell me what you're telling your clients right now.
Yeah, so I'm telling my clients, so obviously still storage is king.
Yep.
As it always has been. Tape storage used to be king. Tape went off a cliff. We sold before that, thank God. We sold at the top.
I know.
But tape has gone by the wayside. Record storage, so the market, like for records right now, it was in the doldrums for the last couple of years. Deals were still happening, but not a lot because certain players were on the sidelines. That's changing now. I mean, we're experiencing definitely more demand for quality target companies from the big buyers.
Yep.
So if you're in storage and you're thinking that you want to exit in X amount of time, people will often say to me, like, my horizon is 5 years. Well, I think in this environment, because again, from what I've seen, the cycles are much more compressed and things can change on a dime, like what happened with interest rates. I think if your horizon is in the next 5 years or so, then now is a good time to be taking a look at what your exit options are, because multiples can change in terms of like multiples of, to be simplistic, gross revs.
Yeah.
They can change by a point to 2 points.
Right.
Based on current conditions. And there aren't that many buyers in this space. So what I'm telling them is if you're interested, you should take a look, because you never have to sell. And we never encourage people that they, sell unless they need to. But the best time to sell is when you don't need to.
Right.
On the shred side, it is a little different because it's highly driven by whether an acquirer likes plant-based versus mobile. Shred's less sticky. Your location is a huge deal.
Yeah.
If you're in an area that is very sparsely populated, or you're in a decent metro area, but there's nothing around you, or it's already highly vended, to your point, that's tough because if I look at it from an acquirer's perspective, when you buy a shred business, it's not sticky usually. People can just walk regardless of the contract, and what are you going to do? See your customers? That doesn't really happen.
Right. Now, unlike tape or box, where they're in your building, care, custody, and control is under your, and it's
very nice leverage.
Different. Yeah, just different leverage. So
yeah.
Okay. So industry it continues to evolve. If you have, but there's not many. I mean, I talked to Iron Mountain, and from what I hear, they're willing to do deals, but there's not many available. I mean, there's just not a ton of deals out there.
Yeah, and I think you're right. There are not a lot of there are deals to be had, but not every company is necessarily saleable to a large buyer. Right. So here's what I see happening is in the past we've dealt with companies that were kind of a certain size, because if they're going to use someone like me or another M&A guy who does this professionally, then obviously they have to pay a fee for that. And they work that into the metrics, and so there may not be enough, like sometimes to justify it.
Right.
So what happens is, for smaller players that maybe don't have the same kinds of options, then it goes from being a target to a bigger company. If they can't sell to a bigger company or a PE firm, then you're looking at more of like a Main Street kind of exit, and a Main Street exit takes on radically different proportions when you look at multiples. It's a lot less. So the goal here is stay off Main Street and get on the radar somehow of a bigger player. And so what that means, so to your point about these guys, like, what do you tell somebody who's just doing shredding and they want to somehow like get to that point where they can have a quality exit? If they're not at that point yet, you either have to you got to differentiate yourself. So get into something different. And here everyone's talking about ITAD, and that could be a really nice opportunity, but everybody's doing it already and been doing it for a long time.
It's a slow burn.
Yeah.
Like it's a slow burn to get where you need to go right now. That's the challenge, right?
Another thing to do would be maybe smaller companies, if they can't sell, then maybe you combine with another local player, and because a bigger enterprise overall is going to be more attractive to a bigger variety of buyers, and it might get you off of Main Street and put you more on the radar of a larger player, and the larger players will pay higher multiples.
Right. Yeah, they just do. That's just naturally.
So the size matters.
So, yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's jump over to the legal side, because you also work in. What are some of the biggest? Just generically, not specifically, but generically, are you seeing any sort of recurring legal things that your clients are asking about or talking about?
Yeah, I am. What I'm seeing is so one thing that's consistent and has been for years, but it never goes away, is the gap between the concept of having sticky, reliable, recurring revenue contracts and the reality of when you're faced with negotiating with a potential customer and having them push back on your contract, making changes to it that make it less valuable. Yeah. That is something that's been, since I've been in this business, has always been an issue.
Always there.
And and it's very easy for a business owner to make exceptions here and there. So for major accounts, obviously you're going to make some exceptions, but I really do believe that it's in the best interest of business owners when they're trying to create value. Let's face it, their wealth is tied up in their business. The contracts are the value of the business. Right. So they need to stand firm when they're getting pushed around by customers. And I see that. I've seen that since the first day I was in this business, and I still see it today as being an issue.
Yeah, well, because I think sometimes over time there's this sense that, just get the money in the door. But if you don't get the contract connected to the money's not worth anything in terms of a M&A deal or an acquisition. It's not worth anything to you.
Yeah. So you should look at so business owners, especially in this space, should look at their business like they're a buyer. Yeah. And so like when I got into the business, that's how I looked at it. I remember thinking to myself when I had the idea for IG2 to get into data storage, I thought we're gonna start this company and we're gonna make it really attractive to Iron Mountain. That was the goal. And right. So you think about like maybe you don't want to sell it eventually. You want to keep it forever and have it be a legacy family business. But if you treat it that way, generally in terms of being disciplined in your business practices, so it's going to be compatible with the bigger players, you're going to have a really quality business at the end.
Yeah, it's such a good way of thinking about it that so often doesn't get thought about, because in the moment you're going, just get the money, just do the deal. But when you're constantly thinking, let's build a company that is easy to acquire, and it's easy to acquire primarily because of the contracts. That's what clients. That's what buyers buy is contracts.
I'll tell you another one that I see quite often. So everybody's had the experience as a business owner in this space where the big fish gorilla customer comes in, and to your point, they want the money. The owner wants the money. It's going to be fantastic cash flow, but the terms aren't the best, and the cash flow might be good overall, but maybe your service price is really low and depressed. Maybe they've got an out. You're giving on perm outs on the boxes. That kind of a deal, it might be really good in the short term, but again, it's going to be a killer on the exit when it gets valued and modeled in, because the big guys are going to look at that contract and say, well, they may not come along. They don't have to come along. Right. So are we going to pay for it up front? So now you get into earn-out scenarios, which are tough to deal with.
Yeah. Really interesting. Well, man, we blew through so much good stuff here, and generally we're going to talk for 10, 12 minutes, and we're at 25. So we have done a great job. So, man, this has been fabulous. And any last words? Anything else that you would wish to say to this community? What else do they need to know?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think it's a great community. I came into this business really as a novice. Like, I was a professional in other areas, but I knew zero about storage, zero about shredding, about any of this stuff. And really, I came to my first Prism International, which is one of the predecessor groups, in 2003. I met a bunch of people, went to sessions. I met you.
Yep.
and everybody in this whole community is so helpful. So I would say learn from your peers.
Yeah.
There are great ideas abounding here. Go to the sessions, get educated, and then I would say when it comes to doing anything with your business, so when it comes to making changes, have a good accountant, have a good lawyer. If you're going to sell, hire a professional. Hire a professional to do any of the things that are important, that are going to drive value for you. You wouldn't operate on yourself. Okay, you treat your business the same way, and it's gonna treat you well in the long term.
Fabulous, great advice. Thank you. It's been great talking to you, and thanks for all you do in the industry. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.